For RotoExperts.com, I'm Nate Pigott with your Week 10 waiver wire advice. And let's start at the quarterback position. David Garrard coming off a bye week, taking on the Houston Texans. He's an excellent matchup play for Week 10, and he's also a good backup quarterback for the future. First of all, Week 10, Houston Texans own the worst pass defense in the NFL. They've allowed 20 touchdowns this season through the air. David Garrard has a lot of weapons: Mercedes Lewis, Mike Sims-Walker, Mike Thomas, Maurice Jones-Drew out of the backfield. It's an excellent matchup, a good start, but you got to look at David Garrard and like what he's done over the last few weeks. He's had 11 touchdowns in his last 4 games. That's 9 through the air, 2 on the ground, and he's only turned the ball over 4 times. I really like David Garrard as a backup quarterback for the rest of the season, available in about 80% of fantasy leagues. He's a great pickup. Go out and get him. Another guy who's widely available, who has been consistent like Garrard, is Matt Castle. Castle got off to a slow start, but in his last 4 games, he's had 8 touchdowns. He's only thrown 1 interception, and generally he has protected the ball very well. 4 turnovers in 2010. So as a starter in fantasy, if you need to start Matt Castle, you can plug him into your lineup and you don't have to worry about the multi-turnover game that kills your fantasy week. He's been doing a good job protecting the ball, available in 70% of leagues. Go get him. And then the last guy at quarterback is Shaun Hill, who will be stepping in for the Detroit Lions for Matthew Stafford. Stafford might be out for as long as the entire season with a separated shoulder. Now, Shaun Hill's dealing with a bit of his own injury, a forearm problem, but you got to like any quarterback that comes into a team that has Calvin Johnson, Nate Burleson, Brandon Pettigrew. He has a lot of weapons, and he was pretty effective earlier this season when he got the opportunity. Shaun Hill, if Castle, Garrard, and some other options, maybe Josh Freeman, are not available, Hill would be the next guy to pick up there. Moving on, let's look at running backs and talk about Mike Goodson. Now, Mike Goodson, if you're in a situation where you're desperate for a running back, he might be your guy. D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, Tyrell Sutton, all out. We're not sure if any of them will return for Week 10, meaning that Goodson could get the start, and you're looking at a team that also lost its starting quarterback, so they're going to have to rely heavily on the run, the Carolina Panthers are, and Goodson will get a bulk of the work. And last week on 12 touches, he got 47 yards. Not too shabby, not too great, but if you're begging at the table, you'll take any scraps you can get. And at a position that's pretty thin on most waiver wires, Mike Goodson might be a starting running back, definitely worth a speculative pickup. 2 players that aren't quite as speculative, but also aren't quite as widely available. Chester Taylor of the Chicago Bears. The Chester Taylor goal line experiment has started in Chicago. He got a goal line touchdown last week. And anybody in fantasy that scores touchdowns is a valuable commodity. If you're in a deeper league, Chester Taylor's worth the pickup. You can't trust him too much. Only 11 carries for 14 yards against Buffalo, a terrible run defense last week. And Chicago's generally been pretty bad against running the ball this season. So don't expect Chester Taylor to become a monster this season, but he's a goal line back. So that's got some value in fantasy. And finally, Willis McGahee. He scored a touchdown in each of his last 4 games. And even though the offense is going through Ray Rice right now in Baltimore, McGahee averaging 12 touches per game over that 4-game stretch. I really like what he can do. He's a good flex option in deeper leagues. If anything were to happen to Rice, McGahee becomes an instant fantasy starter. Go out, grab McGahee. He's available in about 50% of fantasy leagues. Let's move on now and talk about some of your wide receiver options. And Blair White, his name goes on and off this waiver wire edition week, seemingly every other week. This time, Austin Colley's out with a concussion. Blair White will be the number 3 wide receiver, and in that offense, you gotta like what Blair White can do. Peyton Manning got the ball to him 3 times last weekend for 42 yards. I think he'll outperform those numbers, and Blair White is a sneaky starter and a definite guy you want to get on your roster. Go out there and pick up White. Another player, and this is Jacoby Ford of the Oakland Raiders. Ford, he won't be on your team this week. Oakland's on a bye, but 6 catches, 148 yards, and really looked like the most explosive wide receiver that the Oakland Raiders have or have had this season. He's very good in the return game as well. And Ford, you know, with all the problems at wide receiver, you have Louis Murphy's injury, you have Darius Hayward-Bay's inconsistency, and it seems like Ford and Jason Campbell had a nice chemistry. Tom Cable leaning towards Campbell as his starter for the rest of the season. Jacoby Ford worth a speculative move there. He may actually end up being the #1 wide receiver in Oakland. You never know. Go out and pick him up if you are desperate for a receiver. And then 2 guys, these were fantasy stars in 2009. They are coming back. They are joining the fray in 2010, and that is Sidney Rice and Vincent Jackson. First of all, Sidney Rice coming off his injury. It looks like he might actually even get a start in Week 10. He might even be active for Week 10. And, you know, the Vikings obviously have a void at wide receiver. Favre and Sidney Rice hooked up frequently last season, and he was one of the elite wide receiver options. Injuries have kept him out of the lineup for all of 2010, but he could be back. Time to pick him up. And then Vincent Jackson, also a top receiver in 2009. He comes back. Unlike Rice, he was never injured. He's just coming off his holdout/suspension. He has a bye week, 1 game left on his suspension, but if you wait too long, Vincent Jackson will no longer be available. And in that offense, any starting wide receiver has some value. And finally, let's look at Brandon Pettigrew. He's the best tight end free agent right now. He's on pace for almost 80 catches in 2010. And Sean Hill, you know, when Sean Hill was the starting quarterback, Brandon Pettigrew averaged 9 targets per game. I don't expect his catch rate to drop off. I think he's a great add, especially with all the injuries, all the bye weeks at the tight end position. For more fantasy football advice, head over to RotoExperts.com and sign up for our exclusive Edge package. It is on sale for the remainder of the season. Get ready for your fantasy playoffs. Get ready for your keeper league and dynasty league decisions. It's an excellent tool out there. Check out RotoExperts.com also for more videos this week. I'll be back later with wide receiver start and sits. Thanks for checking us out. For RotoExperts.com, I'm Nate Pigott.